Hi everybody, welcome to the Jason Gregory podcast. This is Guyang Yun.
Hello everyone.
Yes. Yeah. Long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while, yes. So, as everyone knows, Guyang's usually behind the camera. She's in front of the camera now.
Yeah.
The days of awkwardness and uncomfortability begins.
Yes. Something I'll really have to overcome.
It's even hard to speak naturally, isn't it? On the camera, it's difficult.
Oh yeah.
Everyone goes through the same thing. Like
yes.
Everyone, as soon as there's a camera on, you can speak. If the camera wasn't recording, you can talk normally. But then next minute, as soon as the record button hits, we all start talking like.
Yeah, the object standing right in front of us, listening to us.
Yeah, it's odd.
Yeah, it's very strange.
Wow, evolutionary speaking, it's very new. so it's not wrong that you feel awkward, you know.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
As you know, I've been doing it for a long time. As everyone knows, I've been speaking in front of the camera and people for a long time. So it's not anything new for me. But as you remember, in the early days, it's a challenge. You know what I mean?
Yes, definitely.
So what's you'll get used to it in time, and So just have fun, enjoy it.
That's it. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. It's difficult, isn't it? Huh? Yeah. But you'll get used to it anyway. So today we wanted to speak, we'll speak about yoga, but there's so many things to talk about, right? So when we talk about yoga, and you and I have a long relationship with yoga. We read the Yoga Sutras many, many moons ago and practiced Hatha yoga for a long time, followed a yogic lifestyle, all of this and that. And I guess the great frustration for us over the years was the misperception of what yoga is. So, as you know, Sadhguru, for example, has a real pet peeve with this too. You know what I mean? Like he calls it Californian yoga and all of that. So, because when you do know traditional yoga, it is kind of interesting how yoga, really only Hatha yoga has transformed in the West. So, you have this ancient tradition, which is basically a lifestyle tradition, which has been transformed into some sort of exercise regime. And there's nothing against that. That's the thing. There's nothing against that. But something in the West, and it happens in some other developing nations, like Korea, for example, in Asia, where you have this cultural appropriation of ancient traditions. And there's a lot of scholars out there who don't even believe cultural appropriation exists. You know what I mean? I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this. And I guess it doesn't exist from the mind of the person who's culturally appropriating a tradition, but...
Here, what do you mean by cultural appropriating?
Cultural appropriation meaning like you're taking like a tradition, and you're blending it into the way that you see it, like what happened with Hatha yoga, with yoga. So they, it was transported to, say, America first, and it became popular through people like Swami Vivekananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, and all of these people early in the day. And then it became what it is today. All around the world, basically. Mainly when people think of yoga, they think of the yoga studio. They think of, getting fit, looking slim. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. We both want everyone to be fit and healthy. There's no, why wouldn't you want to be fit and healthy? And why wouldn't you want to practice Hatha yoga? But when you do culturally appropriate something, you miss out so much more of what the actual system is.
Yeah.
Do you remember I told you that story that time about the Western Buddhist teacher when he was, I forget his name, he was English, and he was sitting with his students, and obviously they were mainly English and American. And one lady asked him, can't we just follow Buddhism without having to believe in reincarnation and karma?
Right.
And because he follows Buddhism to its nth degree, he was like, no, that's not Buddhism. You can't follow Buddhism if you don't follow also the tenets of reincarnation and karma.
Okay.
Yeah. And this also goes for yoga too, right? So yoga have those tenets within the philosophy as well. So a lot of people just practice Hatha yoga as a form of feeling good, a form of exercise, a form of opening up the channels and feeling great, but they don't follow the philosophy. You know?
Yep.
You know, so, and you've read the Yoga Sutras, you know how in-depth the text is.
Yes.
So there's a lot more than just Hatha yoga, you know what I mean? There's like there's Ashtanga yoga, there's the 8 limbs of yoga. So I think that a lot of people are missing out on the richness of the tradition.
Then when was Hatha yoga starting to be practiced?
In the West.
In the West, not it's kind of origin of Hatha
Origin
yoga.
of Hatha yoga, well, it goes way back. It's way back. You know, I mean, we're talking about going back probably even before the time of Patanjali. There were certain asanas and that people used to practice. Like if we look at the Pashupatas, the original Shiva worshippers, you know, we're probably talking BCE here. We're probably talking, you know, who knows? Again, if you look back in Dravidian culture, pre-Hinduism, we could say, pre-Vedic culture.
Before everything
happened. You have that seal they show that they found in Mohenjo-daro.
Yes.
And in the Indus Valley specifically, and that shows a yogi in a yogic posture. Now, there's always debates about what this means. Is it just pure symbology, or is it depicting someone who was actually in a yogic posture? But to come up with that sort of symbology, you have to have some sort of representation for that in the first place. There must have been something going on in that culture that predates anything that we can conceive, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, obviously, from you and I living in India, we know that when you talk to Indians about this stuff, they talk about how Vedanta and yoga is 10,000, some people say 10,000 years old and this and that, and there's no real evidence for that, and I like their enthusiasm, but
they like to exaggerate things usually.
Well, that's like what Joseph Campbell would always say, you know, when you're in India, the great thing about India is you can exaggerate something to as much as you want, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is a fun thing about India as well. But yeah, you know, the origins of Hatha yoga could go back to the Dravidian culture, or whatever culture existed at that time. You know, I mean, we call it the Dravidian culture, but we don't really know, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of the Hatha yoga that, in the sense that we know it today, happened after Patanjali.
Right.
You know, because as you and I both know from reading the Yoga Sutras, is asana specifically means posture, but from a literal Sanskrit sense means to sit. So the original yogic posture was the original meditation posture, the seated posture, the royal posture, so to speak, and which is followed in Taoism, Buddhism, all the traditions in Hinduism, Vedanta, Sankhya, all of those ones. So that in itself is the original yogic position, and dare I say it, probably one of the original meditation positions in Taoism as well, before pre-Tai Chi Chuan and Qigong and all of these practices. So
then today's form of Hatha yoga that we have was formed after Patanjali.
Yeah, I would say so, yes. It's formed up.
Whereas a sitting posture or asanas, things like that started like long before yoga.
Yeah, long before.
Before classical yoga.
Before classical yoga.
Yes.
Yeah, we need to make a distinction also between classical yoga and yoga. Like if you look at Andrew Nicholson's work, one of the great scholars in Hinduism, translator of the Ishvara Gita, and that he raises a good point. Like when we speak about yoga, like if we mention Shiva yoga or Shiva yoga, we're talking before Patanjali here, you know what I mean? Like, and we're talking that maybe there were specific asanas that go back specific Hatha yoga postures that probably go back before Patanjali.
Yeah,
but a lot of it's speculation. But when we speak about yoga, we have to think that Shaiva yoga it's definitely pre-Patanjali, I would say, because if we're looking at the Pashuputtas and we're looking at these sort of groups of people, and even if we look at the story of the Buddha, like you know the story of the Buddha when he left the kingdom, and then he was around a lot of vanaprasthas, a lot of recluses, a lot of renunciates, and they were practicing all sorts of different postures and crazy methods, everything to try and negate the body, So hence Buddha created the middle way, not this extreme or that extreme. We need to find some sort of middle ground. So yeah, it's a tough one because, and again, this brings me back to my original point, is that if people did look at the origins of what you were saying, of Hatha yoga, they would get an interest in studying probably the Ishvara Gita, even studying the Bhagavad Gita, and realizing that when we look at, even in the Bhagavad Gita, so we're talking, very long time ago, we're talking about the Mahabharata here, you know what I mean? Very long time ago. So when we look at that, we have paths of yoga, not yoga as a tradition, like yogic paths. So we have Jnana yoga, karma, bhakti, you know what I mean? And they are designed to appease people's different aptitude for whatever they have. Like, for example, you're a highly intelligent woman, beautiful woman too, of course, but you are attracted more so to Jnana yoga. You're attracted to knowledge, hence you're reading the Yoga Sutras, you're reading the Gitas, you're reading all of these, you're reading the Tao Te Ching. You have an interest in knowledge. It's a knowledge-based system. And this is for people who are intellectual to a certain degree. But then we have Bhakti. Bhakti is a purely emotional path. It's people who are very, in some sense, heart-centered and have a very love and devotion for whatever deity they choose, or whatever god they choose to follow. And then you have karma, and these are basically people who are, I don't want to say go-getters, but they're out there and they're active. They need to see the results of their actions, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like when a jnani doesn't need to, or maybe a bhakti doesn't need to either, because a bhakti has pure love for God. And Ramakrishna is a perfect example of a bhakti. So he did follow the Advaita Vedanta tradition, but he had a pure love for the Holy Mother and Kali, and he was very devotional, even though when you read some of his texts and you hear some of the recorded dialogue from him, he does sound like a jnani half the time, but he may have been one of those fortunate cases that had a good connection between being a bhakti and a jnani, So the whole idea of the Bhagavad Gita, one of the ideas, love, is that you have to try to find a balance between being a jnani, a bhakti, and a karmi. So, which is not very easy, because, like, for example, if you're only a jnani and all you do is you just study and you're just straight ahead intellectual, you can become like the arrogant philosopher or the scholar who has no time for other people and has no time for people who are devotional and stuff like that. You could probably think of the new Atheist Movement to look at.
Yeah, like people like to just philosophizing things and verbalizing this knowledge and things like that, but action not necessarily come along with the knowledge.
No, of course not. Yeah. So you could if we look at the new Atheist Movement, right? We could say that it's like people like Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, these guys. Though I have nothing personally against them, and they are very intelligent men. They do have a low tolerance for religious bhakti people, because when we talk about religion, right, in its common context in the world, we're talking about bhakti. We're talking about Bhakti yoga, really, you know what I mean? We're not talking about Jnana yoga, because if you look at Christianity, Islam, Judaism, you know, those Abrahamic religions, they are devotional based. They're not, though there are esoteric sects, you know, I mean, Gnosticism and Sufism, stuff like that, but they're not even much around these days. It's not like having Vedanta and Hinduism, for example.
It hasn't been prolonged path for people to follow.
No.
Yeah.
No, it hasn't, yeah. And as you know, Vedanta has become, especially because of someone like Swami Vivekananda, who went to America in the late 1800s and brought, you know, the knowledge of Vedanta to America, and then it just spread outside of America. And you and I sit in Australia right now, right? So it has reached the shores of almost every land in the world.
Oh, yeah.
And the irony is someone like Sam Harris, who has studied extensively in Advaita Vedanta and also Tibetan Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, he understands, and actually he has a love for those traditions.
Yes, he's big advocate for like studying Vedanta and mindful meditation and things like that.
Yeah. And he's doing great work in that field, actually. But he has a low tolerance for...
Bhakti, which is religious, ritual-based.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
And devotional-based. So he has like a low tolerance for that. And, you know, we could sympathize with that to a certain degree, because there are a lot of people out there who turn their devotion into fanaticism. So that's where religion becomes problematic, as you know. So when we turn our devotion into fanaticism, you know, conflict, we're bombing buses, we're dropping bombs on each other. This is immaturity at its highest degree. So this is why, in some sense, most of the gurus in India were jnanis, because not to say that they didn't have like any devotion towards Shiva or Vishnu or Brahma, but they were intelligent enough to not fall into the illusion that Shiva is anything more than a representation of Brahman, the ultimate reality. Whereas what you see with any form of idolatry or any form of external worship is people can tend to be fooled by the image of what or who they love, and if anyone attacks that or makes fun of that, then they lose their center. And this is, you know, obviously what happens, you know, around the world. You know, one of the greatest conflicts, right, that's kind of an ongoing conflict that no one speaks about, is Christianity versus Islam, right? This has been going on
for a very long time.
And no one seems to talk about it because we cloak it through America and the Middle East, right? So we use the nation as the veil about what it's truly about. But what it's truly about is Christianity and Islam. So this is why in India the guru was always a jnani, and that's why Shankara says in the Atma Bodha that those who can come to self-knowledge or come to the knowledge of Brahman or the discovery of Atman within us can only happen for if you follow jnana. So first you should have the knowledge, and then, you know, other things should happen later. So you should then have a love for God, and then also you can act in the world in a very conscious manner, not in a self-righteous manner, not in an opinionated manner, but in a manner that is useful for other people, you know.
Then how important to practice bhakti and karma yoga is from being jnani?
For a jnani? Or
for a jnani, yes.
For a jnani? How important? Well, it's like what we were saying. It's I would say it's important for someone like Richard Dawkins to practice, right? So maybe it might soften his perception of the world a little bit, and he wouldn't be so aggressive or jaded about what religion is. And, you know, you and I both know through our extensive study of cultural evolution and just evolutionary psychology in general, religion is a very important part of the evolution of the human species. You know, so, and I think these are things that maybe Richard doesn't consider or just has a low tolerance for. I don't know if he knows the work of Joseph Heinrich and people of those sorts who are doing amazing things in the field of cognitive science and that these days, and are revealing, like Robert Macaulay's book, science, religion as natural science is not. Talking about how our mind naturally is adapted to intuition and our feelings, as opposed to our intellect, which makes up a really small bandwidth of our mind. And this is, again, what happened through the Enlightenment period was, in the West, was that we could be rational all the time, right? This is the whole idea, that there was a complete disregard for intuition and for religion. And this is where science and religion was a big part of where they departed, was during that period, you know. So, as you know, as a musician, intellect is all well and good, right? You need the intellect to study music, musical theory. You need to know how to hold the finger positions in the violin. You need a sharp intellect for this. You need a strong, rational, cold cognition for this. But for the beauty of the music to play, your intuition has to be fully in sync with your emotions. And that's actually what makes beautiful musicians, right? When you see a musician who is very emotional with their instrument, you feel that that's something different than if I was to play it, right? I'm thinking about everything, and it sounds like a dead cat. And these are the blind spots, is what's happened in the West. Actually, all around the world, when we've taken rationality completely over our intuitive faculty, which actually makes up most of our brain. When you look at the hot cognition, we've got all this unconscious region behind the brain, behind the prefrontal cortex, which is really running the show. I'm doing this to you now, right? Like this. I'm not thinking about this. It's happening.
It's unconscious.
It's unconscious, yeah. Your listening is happening because of that. Your responses are happening because of that, in a natural conversation, in a natural setting. Unless you're in a BBC interview or something like that, and you're thinking that's a different setting. But in a natural conversation like this, we're trying to just speak naturally and be natural and feel where the conversation goes. That's the beauty of conversations, right? That's the art of conversation. Instead of, going to a conversation, if someone has a pre-planned idea of what they should say, then the conversation doesn't go too far, because their agendas are exposed and, all of that.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible that how religious practices bond people and community, and that has got nothing to do with the intellect, which is purely based on common values. That's which had been presented in the religious texts or wisdom traditions, and it's all the religions are based on belief and faith on something which isn't describable by our intellect. But it is pretty interesting that when we have these beliefs or faith within us, you get such tremendous relief within you, which is which makes you peaceful, happy, stable, and that's that cannot be explained. It's unexplainable why, but for some reason we like to ignore that part of ourselves, and we just want to believe in facts and science, and of course those things has its place and it's very important. But I find it's interesting that how we put so much value in these things that we cannot see or explainable, really, right? Over just cold cognition, isn't it? Yeah.
Just calculator.
Yeah.
Just a calculator, cutting the world up to appease one's own intellect, basically. Yeah, it's interesting because what you were saying was that that belief and the religion is actually alleviates a lot of stress and anxiety for people, and actually gives them a center in their life where they can trust life. And so we're not really talking about belief, right? I mean, we are talking about belief, but what we're talking about is trust. Or you know, people say faith, but I think trust is a better word, sorry. And what a lot of spiritual traditions do, especially Eastern ones, is it gives you that trust in life. Like, okay, look, life's not going my way at the moment, right? But but surely something's gonna happen, because I have faith in the Tao, or I have faith in Shiva, or I have faith in Christ, or whoever, you know what I mean? Like, whatever is your center of gravity that gives you that trust. Obviously, the Eastern traditions go deeper, because it's about, you know, coming back into your heart and understanding the true nature of the universe. And in doing that, that gives you the trust in life, as opposed to having like an external figure that gives you trust, like, you know, for example, a cross or Christ or something like this. But there is a lot to say about that, because it does, you know, when we talk about an atheist or a religious person, and we look at depression rates, and we look at people who suffer from suicide and this and that, there's a lot of correlation between people who have a lack of faith in the world or a lack of trust and those who do. Even though, yeah, all right, we can sit around all day and we could say how unfounded a religious person's beliefs are. We could, right? Like, we could put our Richard Dawkins cap on, and we could say how unfounded some beliefs are and how outdated some are. But does it make that person's life at ease? Are they more peaceful from following that? These are the questions we're not asking. And cognitive science asks those questions. It asks are these religious systems, are they operating as some sort of psychological system which is keeping the person in balance and peaceful? These are the questions that cognitive science are asking, because they're a lot deeper, you know what I mean? So
there's like a function of religion to an individual and communal level.
And a communal level,
yes.
Exactly, good point, yeah. Especially on a communal level,
yeah.
but more so on an individual level, but also on a community level. It binds the community. Look at India, right? Mm-hmm. India is the perfect example of how a cultural system can bind a whole nation and keep it harmonious and even tolerant of other traditions, because it's built on such a deep spiritual system. You know, so if we look at the Bharat culture and we look at Hinduism, you know, most people aspire to study Vedanta, practice yoga, understand Sankhya. It's such a diverse system, and they all have their own deity that they follow, but no one is better or worse than anyone else. It's more of a Taoist understanding that a human life is no greater than an ant. Everything goes together as one. It's all Shiva, or it's all Vishnu, and that's what it is, you know what I mean? Sure, people would probably argue that there's turmoil in India at the moment between Hindus and Muslims and this and that, but that hasn't been long-lived, and that's another thing that we're not going to talk about today, but that's something that is the result of a lack of a Hindu identity, and the world, in doing, like, how the world is kind of structured. Hindus have never raised their voice in some sense, because they are built on a tolerant culture, and other people take advantage of that. That's a lot of things what people don't understand. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, the presidential candidate, that lady, she spoke up for the Hindu identity, and she got scolded by the woke patrol, you know. So, I mean, you're not allowed to speak up for anyone these days. You're not allowed to raise an issue, you know. And this is going off topic, but that's part and parcel of some of it, you know. So, but that's the beautiful thing in India. You see that communal bond that, you know, when you and I go there, right, we are overwhelmed with the sense of community, the warm-heartedness of the people from all walks of life, you know, no matter whether they're rich, middle class, or or living on the poverty line. They're all so warm-hearted, you know.
They just see you for who you are, and who they just see you who they see.
Who they see,
really.
yeah.
Like
yeah.
they have no conceived idea of who you are or skin color. Actually, skin color often brings a more friendly people, I think, because they're so curious. Such friendly, curious, warm-hearted people.
As you know, it breaks our heart when we're there, right? Like, because when you see people with far less money than you and I and everyone listening to this, and then they offer you to come to their home and they're going to cook you a meal.
Yeah, how many times have we got asked?
Yeah. And we don't know them from a bar of soap. We don't know them from a bar of soap. We never met them.
And we just met like 5 minutes ago?
Yeah, we're sitting down having a chai with them. And it's like, you come for dinner tonight? It's like, well, what are you cooking? You know what I mean? Like, but like, it's something that you don't get outside. Well, you know, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan. South Asia is a unique place because of that older Bharat culture. It is such a unique place. And I mean, that sense of community and warmth towards people it's mind-boggling. Especially when you come from Korea and you come from Australia. It's quite overwhelming, you know what I mean? Like, it moves you to tears a lot of the time when you see the way that people treat each other. Of course, there's going to be the odd person who's over there who's out for themselves and treats people badly. You get that everywhere. But in general, most people are trying to do their best, and they have a common bond with one another. And like you said, they have no preconceived idea of how you should be, you know what I mean? It's that dog psychology, right? Yeah. That you and I always talk about. Like, a dog can look at you, and that a dog looks at you and just sees you. Yeah. Doesn't see like Guy Young, the Korean, or Guy Young, the musician. It just sees you, and it loves you for you, you know. And you get this with South Asia. You get a lot of that. You get people that just appreciate you for you, and they just, like you said, they just want to know you. I mean, they don't give a damn about what happened in the past or what you're going to do in the future. They want to know who you are right now, you know. And it's a beautiful thing, you know, and it's something that all the whole world can learn from.
Absolutely.
You know. So, yeah, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, all those places, you know, so amazing. And I think that the problem with the world is because we base our world on status and class and you know, the cleanliness of a place. We are, a lot of people in more developed nations scoff at places like India, and it's really, you know, it makes those people lesser for scoffing. You know what I mean? They should not. They need to really understand the heart of those sorts of places. You know. So if you're sitting in Australia or America or wherever, and you're judging a culture from a distance, this is, you know, again, unintelligent and something we've all been guilty of once upon a time. But it's, you know, it's time to grow up and get real. And I guess getting back to what we were talking about, yoga is a system that can help us grow up and realize the intrinsic beauty to everything, you know.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And it's amazing to see, like, these yogis or sadhus or just ordinary people. We often get to see in the park, those people practice Hatha yoga. And, well, in the West, we go to fitness class for gym, for the yoga, and wear this nice yoga clothes and yoga mat. I mean, it's good. It's a good thing. But in India, that's just so part of their life, isn't it? Like they just something what they do, like just something we brush teeth every day type of thing. That's really, really nice to see.
It's the fabric of their life, right? So it's like what we were talking about earlier, right? It's they follow the actual tradition. it's not something that we just do, it's something we live by. So Hatha yoga in the West and in the developed world is something we do, it's not something we live by. So, I'm going to go and do a hot yoga class this afternoon. And then after the hot yoga class, people are free to, follow their, whatever they want to do, and a lot of people can become like the church, right? People go to the church and then they're an asshole when they come out of the church, so they're not truly following the tradition. But as we see in India, as you said, like, how many times we've been to, India or even Nepal. I remember specifically one time you and I were on a bus from Kathmandu to Pokhara, one of my most disliked bus journeys for the length, but one of the most beautiful journeys for scenery. But as we were leaving Kathmandu, there's that big park, I don't know what the park is called, but right in the corner of the park there was a lady who was instructing it, and they're just in the park, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, you just roll up, and that's it, She was giving them a few tips, and she was doing it out of the kindness of her heart and all of this and that, and
yeah, everybody come together and practice.
Yeah, just like that.
Yeah.
It's not in a yoga studio, not like monetary based. It's part of the fabric of life, It's
a big part of their lifestyle, I think.
Exactly.
That's something, we really can learn from.
Definitely.
And also to be able to follow the practicing Hatha yoga authentically is also to be able to understand the core kind of philosophy of classical yoga, I believe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what's this classical yoga by Patanjali?
Well, we both know it, but it's basically, well, as we know, it's the 8 limbs, right? It's the Ashtanga system. It's the Ashtanga system, and it's also the tenets that are followed within all of Indic thought, basically. So, the ideas of reincarnation, of karma, which actually there's elements of that in Taoism too. If you read the Hua Hu Ching, and that you see reincarnation and karma and that mentioned, maybe to a lesser degree than the great Indian traditions, but yeah. So when we talk about classical yoga, we're talking about following, especially those tenets. Like, we're talking about, as I said, reincarnation, karma, but we're also talking about the 8 limbs. So we're talking about yama, niyama. We're talking about pranayama, asana, pratyahara, dharana, jhana, samadhi.
That's right, yeah.
So those 8, and it's a complex system to actually unpack. So when you look at the first 2 limbs, like if you look at yama, niyama, like you're talking about, yama is like the your external moral obligations in the world. You know what I mean? So how you should act morally in society. So it's giving you sort of from the beginning, it's giving you like a kind of a moral template of how to behave yourself, how to behave yourself. And then the niyama is actually how to, the internal moral obligations is about how to, implement them and to make them more firm in you so that you can become a virtuous person. So within those we see all sorts of things. Like we see, brahmacharya. We see brahmacharya meaning making sure you eat all your meals at home, having sexual restraint. So like not becoming like, someone who's out, a booze hound who's out on a Friday and Saturday night, womanizing. None of that. But it's about brahmacharya. You can become a brahmachari also in marriage, but your sexual life has to be, restricted, and it has to be more pure. So it has to be more it's more love-based instead of the animal drives kind of kicking in, which can still happen in married couples, So you have that. You also have ahimsa, and ahimsa ahimsa means non-harming. a lot of people confuse ahimsa with vegetarianism and veganism. That makes up, a small part of it, but it's not the totality of it. Because when we talk about ahimsa, we mean also trying not to harm with our way of thinking too. So you don't want to cultivate hatred for people or groups.
So within even our thoughts.
Even within our thoughts,
right.
yeah.
Not just action.
Not just
harming other people outwardly.
That's only half of it. Yeah.
Right.
The inward part is probably more so important, because if you have that in check, you're not going to outwardly attack
naturally,
yeah, because you're working on yourself, right? You're working on trying to cultivate harmonious dispositions in yourself. So trying to get rid of hatred, trying to not be as angry, trying to cultivate compassion, love, forgiveness.
That's very challenging.
Challenge for everyone, right? That's the big challenge we all have, because we've all been socialized and we've been taught by unintelligent teachers most of our life, be that our educational system or directly through our family or friends or what have you. So there is all of that. So ahimsa makes up a part. There's so many parts of yama niyama to talk about. But again, they are only the beginning of the yogic system. Obviously, greed plays a part in those first two. So you need to have greedlessness. You can't be doing things for yourself. You can't be self-interested. It's trying to teach you how that actually brings you back to accord with yoga. And to be specific, yoga means, if we look at the root Sanskrit, yug, means to unite or connect with the divine. And that brings up an interesting thing within the niyama system, because one of the fifth niyama, is Ishvara Pranidhana. And Ishvara Pranidhana means, we could translate as like worship of the Lord, or worship of God, or what have you. And then the interesting thing about that is because when you look at yoga being a strictly dualistic system, Patanjali's sort of thrown that in there. And you could probably, a lot of people always ask me, like, can we interpret yoga as a non-dualist system? And I say yes, but you have to understand it in some different sort of ways, you know what I mean? But Ishvara Pranidhana is kind of like Patanjali's way of saying that the idea of yoga is to unite with Brahman. He uses the term Ishvara here, and Ishvara is usually used as a term for Brahman. So a lot of the debate, as Andrew Nicholson talks about, is what Ishvara is he talking about here? Is he talking about Vishnu, or is he talking about Shiva? Like, what is the text talking about? So, and that's a hotly debated topic between Vaishnavas and Shaivas. So basically it applies to both. You can just, Ishvara means either or. I think that the reason why Patanjali used that specific term is because he didn't want to get into the debate of, which god is greater than...
That's not the point, because...
No, that's not the point. That's not the point of yoga, so I think he used a pretty neutral term for that. So, though we could say definitely from a Shaiva perspective, if we look, when people do think of yoga, they think of Shiva as God, right? Or Shiva as Brahman, I should say. You go to the Ganga, you go to Varanasi, you go to Arunachala, you go to Pashuputanath in Kathmandu. So you go to all these places, and they're Shaiva places. They're not Vaishnava places, even though a Vaishnava would go there to worship too. This is a beautiful thing about India, like your God is my God, is his God, it doesn't matter. There's not a very strict, there's not a strict division that much between Shaivas and Vaishnavas. So he put that in there, and so then you got that idea of Ishvara Pranidhana. So the role of part of the roles of following the yamas and niyamas is to come back into union with Brahman. And how do we do that? Well, that's where the other limbs come in, So we practice asana, so we learn posture. We learn how to, and as we talked about before, we learn how to sit, in the royal posture, so to speak. And And also we learn pranayama, so we learn how to control our breath. And the importance of controlling the breath is because the ancient way of thinking, and basically the way it is that when we control our breath, it has a significant impact on the mind, So when we do deep breathing exercises, your mind naturally becomes calm. When you follow the breath naturally in vipassana and these sorts of techniques, your mind naturally becomes calm. It may take time sometimes, especially if you have a lot of turbulence in your life. But it will eventually. And so pranayama is very important as well. And then that's where it gets into probably the deeper elements. So the last 4 limbs of yoga are probably the most important. But it's such an expert lifestyle system, because if you don't understand the first 4, it's hard to understand the last 4. And so pratyahara being, in the 8 limbs, right? Pratyahara being the 4th, is like the gate to the inner limbs.
Next 4 limbs.
The next limbs. So the first one. So you've got yama, niyama, pranayama, asana. Sorry, it's the 5th one. Sorry, pratyahara being the 5th. And the inner limbs are the last 3. So dharana, jhana, samadhi. So pratyahara being the control of the senses. So the withdrawal of the senses, I should say. And that goes in many ways too. It comes to sensory, to your ears, everything. So it's a complete withdrawal of senses, because what that does is when you withdraw your senses, as you know from being a long-term meditator, when you withdraw your senses from the external world, you come back more into harmony, or you come back within inside yourself, and that's when you can begin to work on a deeper level. So we technically have, as Patanjali pointed out, and as other great sages pointed out before him and after him, is we technically have a concentration problem in the world, is what we have. So you remember the days being a kid when your mum's hitting you, or your dad's going, "Oi, focus, concentrate," and you don't even know. You don't know how to, and they also don't know how to. You've never been taught. And so what meditation is basically a method of teaching you how to concentrate. And especially yoga is a method of teaching you how to concentrate. And the reason why concentration here being dharana, being the 6th limb, why it's important is because that's what leads into the deeper levels of meditative absorption, jhana, and also samadhi. So when we look at dharana being, you need an object still of meditation for dharana. So you're experiencing vipassana. So in vipassana, the awareness of the breath, the awareness of senses, these are objects of meditation, not an actual object, like just like an anchor for your meditation. And this helps cultivate concentration. And so, as you know from being a long-term meditator, staying in monasteries for a long time, the longer you stay and the longer you cultivate concentration, the deeper you can go into your mind and into your meditation to what in yoga they call meditative absorption, jhana. So where the object of meditation disappears, or you become one with the object of meditation, I should say. So the subject becomes the object, or the object becomes the subject, you see. And that's what jhana is. Jhana is that single-pointed concentration without... It's the perfection of concentration. It should be actually translated as the perfection of concentration, in some sense, because that's what it is. Jhana is the perfection of your concentration.
Such the clarity you can get it from doing meditation.
Yeah, definitely.
Really deep level of concentration, focus.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's how you get into jhana. And then obviously when you're in jhana, when you have absorbed into that, the subject-object, that perfected concentration, that's where the sense of subject-object disappear. And that's what samadhi is. Samadhi is people say contemplation or contemplative ecstasy or transcendent ecstasy. Georg Fursten uses ecstasy, right, as a translation, but he does clarify that we're not talking about like tripping like this. We're talking about like a transcendental like it's an ecstatic state because you're not the person anymore.
That's that blissful state. That's what people say, like real pure bliss, like ananda. Yeah.
Exactly. The end of the subject, the end of the object. It's all become one, right? It's all, well, one's even a bad term because that implies another. So it's become isness or whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of terms they use these days. So,
I mean, we can experience that state of blissfulness through meditation and deep meditation, but it feels like always very momentary and temporary. And when you open your eyes, you're back.
Yeah. The world's here again. The troubles, the obstacles, all of that.
But they're there for us to overcome and teach us how to navigate through it. That's also a big part of our spiritual practice, isn't it?
It definitely is. Yeah.
I find it. I mean, spending a lot of time in the monastery in such peaceful place. There's no electricity. You gotta rely on candles. Food, very basic food, which is thankfully cooked by local ladies, old ladies, but it's such great experience we get from being placed like that. But at the same time, it feels like problem begins when you decide to leave the place, right? We can live in monastery forever if we choose to, right?
Yeah.
But if you were to come out to the world and society, then this is how it was like before. Then you kind of try not to be your old way. It's very difficult. It's very challenging.
But this is spiritual work for you and I and for everyone listening, is that the process of meditation or the meditative mind, and that usually begins when you leave the monastery, because you have to deal then with just the ordinary mundaneness of life, and you've changed, but the world hasn't changed one iota. That's, we all know that, right? So we might have travelled before, gone to exotic lands, or we might have went to a monastery, and then we come back to our home country, or we go back to our familiar surrounding, and nothing's changed. You changed tremendously, but no one else has.
Well, that's why sometimes friendship goes apart, relationship with family often kind of break up, and you sometimes in conflict with your own self, that something wrong with me, what's going on. It's very confusing. But I think it's kind of all part of the process and growth. And that also teaches us how much we were attached by those things. I mean, we all coexist as a human being, and we all rely on each other, no matter we know them or we don't. But close friends and family are often the ones we get attached to. And after such extensive meditation, we, like you said, we change, and the world hasn't changed a thing. And when you go back to see your friend or family, and they talk about all the same old things, which has no interest to you at all.
Yeah.
That's what make people who are on the path find so difficult.
Yeah.
That there is a lot of confusion coming. It's not easy.
Not easy, yeah. And you have to be very sincere in this path, as you and I have, and we've seen other people slip on the path and fall back into old habits, and because of what you're saying, right? Because some friends may say, "Oh, you're a weirdo now," and we don't want to hang with you, or your family might condemn you for drinking the wrong water.
Oh, you've changed.
You've changed, all of these things, as if you're not supposed to change, which is kind of ridiculous. But what you need to be is completely sincere. And actually you have to be almost, I would say, as ruthless as Sri Prabhupada when he was saying, doesn't matter if it's your family or whoever, your wife, your husband, kids, don't matter a damn. Spiritual path, that's what you're doing. You got to be fully dedicated that this is real and this is the work that has to happen. And you and I have designed our life around that, and that's what we've followed since we cleaned our eyes, washed the dust off our eyes. And that's what a lot of other people who listen to my videos and other people as well, So you have to be fully dedicated to the path, and that may mean that some friendships may fall away. It may mean that some relationships break up. I don't want that. Nobody wants that. But we're talking about life here. You know what I mean? We've all had relationships that have fallen apart because of this. And it's not any of your doing or anyone who follows a path. It's usually the other way around. They might just stop calling you because all you're interested in is talking about spirituality or philosophy or things that have value, and all they're interested in is talking about Netflix. So I
have to laugh.
The worlds are diametrically opposed. So it's it's a collision course that can't happen. And this is why there's a lot of research out there that states, a lot of scientific research that states that a lot of people become more affectionate and have stronger bonds with their friends that they have through life than their family. Family is a blood relationship, right? It's almost a relationship in some sense of obligation. We know certain families, there are a lot of families in the world that are in discord and they actually don't like each other, but it's because they are, siblings or their parents or whatnot. It's just, that's the cards they were dealt. And that's all well and good. I think that you have to try and keep the family strong and do what is needed to a certain degree, but you don't want to sell yourself short because people disagree with the way you are now. I think that that's selling yourself short, you know what I mean? And this is why, as I said, with scientific research, that they say, people for example, if you met some wonderful people traveling, and travelers usually have the similar mindset. They're out there, they're trying to explore life, and they're open-minded, they're interested in learning new things, and most travelers usually have the same mentality. And the next minute you start to resonate with them, and then you build this whole relationship with them that can last a lifetime. You and I know this from having relationships with people who are travelers who coincidentally have become our best friends, as opposed to the friends we had in our previous life, which is very strange, right? So I've had friends since I was 5 years old, but because I changed and I started writing and I started teaching and stuff like this, it's really conflicted with my friends that I had since I was a young person, But the people we met traveling, they're all for it. They're all for it, and they're like, yeah, good man.
They want to know you.
They want to know you, no matter what. I could stop teaching and writing books. They're still going to want to know what I'm up to. Yeah. And that's exactly what you're talking about. So it is difficult, and a lot of the reason people fall off the path is because of attachment, like what you said beautifully. It was attachment, because to disattach from people can be difficult, and it can be hurtful. I've had, as you know, I've had friends that have, when I changed and became who I was many moons ago, said things that they probably regret to me and stuff like that. But I had to deal with it and I moved on. You know what I mean? It's something I don't even get upset about now. So all I can say to anyone listening is that if you are going through that experience, is that, I know it's a cliche, but that will pass, eventually. But that's the path for all of us. It's very important that you don't fall off the path and you continue to meditate, study, try to be the best human you can. And ultimately, hopefully, we're all here we're following this path to find liberation in whatever it is, through whatever path it is, I should say.
And I think attachment also reveals our inner insecurity. But you would never realize it until you get detached, I think.
Yeah.
When you kind of stop that strong relationship with someone by accident or whatever, for whatever reason. And like you said, that moment is not easy. It's very difficult, emotionally especially. But over time, you will get better, and then you can kind of look back about what happened. Then you get to realize how much you were attached to that relationship. And also, that attachment back then gave you somewhat this illusory security, that it wasn't secure at all from the start, I think. That's what I think relationship with the children and parents, I think.
Yes.
Maybe it works both ways. Kids are attached to the family, builds them like this illusory security. So when they leave home, or like parents pass on or something like that, and they feel this big empty hole in their heart, or it also works the other way around.
Yes.
When parents see the kids move on, and they start to really feel like they lost their purpose in life, and that sort of attachment gives you such illusory, insecurity, psychological insecurity.
Exactly.
I think, and to overcome that is very difficult. But when you overcome it, I think that's how you truly can be free from that. Once you become free from attachment, then you are free from it, right? Then all that pressure you had, you didn't even know you had it, but the pressure is gone, and you can walk a lot more freely. You can be yourself, or you can be as creative as you want. You can do whatever you want to do, which you could never think of before, something like that. Yeah.
That's it, exactly. And as you said, there's an insecurity there, right? So even the family, the religion, the country, these build borders in our mind that don't really exist. You know what I mean? So we're attached to certain things that don't exist, and they can be taken away from you in any moment. You know what I mean? We have a relationship, right? We love each other, but one day that's not going to be there too. All of these relationships and that are going to end up falling away. It's important how you live in the moment and how you appreciate in the moment. And I heard this once, that you have to love the person or the individual that much. This is to show how detached you are from them. that you are willing to let them go as well. You know, you are willing to let them go. That's how much you love them. It's time for them to move on, or whatever, to move on. You know, so which says a lot about that person. It says that they're very secure in themselves, and they know that, you know, true security is not through being attached to a lot of things. It's from knowing that you are perfectly fine on your own, but the relationships we have beautify our life, you know. But there are things that we should not, like, you know, aggressively hold on to or be attached to, you know what I mean? Detachment is a very difficult path to follow for anyone, because we all have an emotional center, and it is sad when people die and, you know, relationships fall apart. And like a Taoist will say, yeah, it's okay, cry, you should feel that emotion fully, but what will happen eventually is you'll overcome that. And it will show you that the true security that you have is within yourself, your connection to the greater totality. These things that happen, these are the fluctuations of life. You know, relationships are going to go pear-shaped. Parents and children are going to fight eventually. These things are going to happen because this is the dynamicness of life.
Yeah.
You know, it's how mature we are to let things just fall away. Like you said, the attachment. How willing are we to let things go so that we can move on, they can move on too. And usually in doing so, when we do let go, we thrive. You know, we begin to thrive. So, or they begin to thrive as well. Either way, you know. You know, I always remember, as I've told you many times, when I first left home when I was 19, and I jumped in the car and I was driving away, you know, moving from where I'm born in Mackay, moving to country town Toowoomba, and Mum's like bawling her eyes out in the front yard, just stay, you know. And Dad's like, just get out of here. Dad's like, get out of here, go and live your life. But Mum really struggled with it, you know what I mean? I was her last child, and it was sad for all of us, you know what I mean? But what happens? You get on with it, and the relationship still goes on, you know what I mean? We were ringing each other every few weeks, and she's catching up, seeing what's going on, and the relationship moves on, you know what I mean? It's not something that's, in some sense, permanent, you know. When people die, it's permanent, but not those sorts of things, you know what I mean? So, you know, we need to cultivate a certain level of, which you raised a good point, security within ourselves. Because we do live in a world, especially in the West, and we're seeing this with the current situation at the moment, that people took for granted the way life was. They thought life was secure and they thought they were protected. But what life often does is it throws our life a curveball. What Eric Weinstein called the big nap. So we've been on the big nap since Second World War, we could say, right? We've been on the big nap. Life's been grand. We're just chilling. We're doing whatever we want. We hadn't really experienced something like we're experiencing right now in a long, long time. So it exposed our false sense of security. And so this means that you need to develop yourself psychologically and spiritually. Each and every one of us have to do that. And that's what systems like yoga do. They help to develop the individual to a heightened state of consciousness where if a tsunami comes, you can surf that, you can ride it out, and you won't drown, you know. So, and that's where these systems help. It helps with exactly what you're saying, having that detachment from life. But it's an interesting thing. You have a detachment from it, but you have a real deep appreciation for what you have. That's the amazing thing about it, and the contradiction actually about that. It's really contradictory, but that's the way it is. It's usually those people who are super attached to something that they take for granted everything they have.
Yeah, we find that a lot from people. I mean, yeah, people that we get to know. Yeah, we see that sometimes. Yeah.
We've all suffered from that. We've all taken things for granted, and we've all thought that we've had such a secure place in life. But in the end, you know, life will throw a curveball. Life does have its own way, and the spiritual role for all of us is learning how to navigate through life's obstacles. You know, that's like what you were mentioning about coming out of the monastery and going into life. Meditation and spending extensive time in the monastery in that is to teach you how to navigate through life and to become an individual that we really need in the world. We need people who are compassionate, forgiving, loving, and don't have hatred in their hearts. We need those sorts of people rather than having people who are dualistically minded and self-interested. We don't need people like that. If we continue to have people like that, then we'll have no toilet rolls on the aisle, you know, so the toilet paper will run out.
Yes.
So it's very important, and that's what the spiritual work is about. And that's why Sri Prabhupada said, doesn't matter who's going to fall away, this work is the work that needs to be done. And obviously if you go on outside and you look at the world and you look at the division in the world and the illusionary separation that people believe exists, then nothing can be more important than following the spiritual path for all of us, you know.
Especially with what's going on around the world right now, we get to see how immature we all are actually. We have been very spoiled, like you mentioned. We never run out of food. The fridge will be always full. We can always demand what we want to eat or to do. So when this kind of life-threatening crisis happens, then we like to blame other people for some reason. And we put the fingers point at like our leaders, political leaders or whoever leaders, saying they're not doing the right things, and I don't know, because we like to blame other people, or that's just easier because we don't have to work on ourselves, we don't have to blame ourselves. But we know that any change or solution for greater good begin from an individual change has to come into place, especially at this time around with this sort of crisis. Without individuals' effort, we won't have toilet rolls, like you said, because it must have started with a handful of people, I think. And everyone else just kind of panicked.
Well, it comes back to what you were saying. That's a result of group mentality. They're not secure in who they are. They're attached to the community too much, and they follow the herd. So, as you know, the spiritual endeavor is an individual endeavor. So, you're not going to be the one who's buying up the toilet rolls. You're going to be the one who's saving the toilet rolls for other people. You're going to be the one who lives a life of moderation. You know, that's going to be your focus, because you understand that life is much bigger than just who you are. You know, and that's what actually, ironically, the individual endeavor exposes, is that the idea of you as a self-interested individual, you know, always in protection of what's happening in the world, always in that protective mode, trying to protect yourself, is completely false. What the spiritual path does is it shuts that door, and it shows you that you belong and that you need to trust the world. And actually, in some sense, even though people are buying up all the toilet rolls, you need to trust other people as well, because not everyone's buying up the toilet rolls. We need to put this into consideration as well. There's not that I wouldn't say that everyone is self-interested in this certain situation that we're in. We won't give it a name. But that's what the spiritual path does. It allows you to merge with something greater than yourself, and allows you to deal with the situation how it has to be dealt with, you know what I mean? Because I can tell you, everyone that's listening to this now, if we are focused on our own spiritual cultivation and our own individual liberation, you'll come out of this crisis with no skin missing. You might even be better off from this. You might have developed yourself even more during this time. You know, that's not to diminish that all of the tragedy that's happening out there, but if we can take at least a positive out of it, we can concentrate on ourselves and become really the best versions of ourselves that we can, so that when the world does go back to normal, you'll be completely transformed, you know.
Yeah, this time around, we're supposed to enjoy watching our football and things like that. But because of what's happening at the moment, everything is on pause. So, well, for me personally, what I realize is that how much we depend on one another, no matter you know them or not.
Yes.
Like, more people take precaution, better things gonna go.
Exactly.
Quicker this thing will end, right? But if other people aren't taking precautions, then, well, who knows? Who knows how long it's gonna go? Who knows when we can travel overseas freely again? It's all individuals' responsibility as well.
Yeah. And so that individual responsibility comes down to how we develop ourselves as individuals, you know. So the problem, one of the big problems with our world, and it has always been a big problem with our world, is we've always relied on some sort of external form of governance or an authority to tell us how to live and how to be. And what Eastern spirituality can teach us is that that's false, completely false. And we are seeing that through this crisis now, right? It's completely false. The power is all within your own hands, and it has always been within your own hands. And so to rely on any sort of external form of governance, no matter whether it's a government, a religion, or a nation, or some sort of authority figure over you who you believe is superior, actually is not real. It doesn't mean that you don't have to accord with those sorts of things, but those things shouldn't govern your life. You should be concentrating on who you are, who you truly are, and trying to follow the path sincerely, so that when these situations happen, or if it happens again, you are in a place where you can deal with anything. You know what I mean? They say that tough times breed tough people, right? And I would alter that and say tough times should create spiritual people. That's the way it should be, you know, because people should realize then what they took for granted when everything was open and free. And we should begin to reorient our focus on the simple things in life that were in the background, that we were always in the foreground looking at what's important or what we think is important, you know what I mean? And so that's one beautiful thing that can come out of it, you know what I mean? So you and I have changed certain things in our lives in this time, but because you and I live such an isolated life anyway, not much has changed. So, I mean, we're a bad benchmark for anyone, but I just hope everyone listening, can, take some positive inspiration out of what we're saying about this, because though we can continue to look at the news and the figures and all of this to do with the situation, we can also choose to be a different way in this time, and to try and take a positive out of a terrible situation. And that positive is the development of yourself spiritually and trying to cultivate harmonious dispositions in the self so that when the world comes back to normal, you are much more valuable to the world than you know. You're already more valuable to the world than you know. You know, but we lose sight of that because we think that we are worthless and meaningless. But this again is the external form of governance telling you that you should be inferior, but you don't have to be, you know. And so Eastern spirituality, yoga, what we were talking about earlier, is designed to tell you that you're not inferior. Your actual true nature is Purusha, it's pure awareness. It's not stained.
Yeah, that's artificial concept, isn't it?
Yep.
That like social status especially,
Yep.
and or how you should look like, or how you should behave certain way at certain situation. All these things are man-made concept in our mind, which never existed actually.
They don't exist. You know, the group and the external form of governance, in a sense, we can say it exists to a certain degree, but it's an abstraction. It's not what's really there. It's like what you said beautifully earlier. The world changes through the individual's change, not through some sort of external collective change. People have to change for there to be widespread change. You know what I mean? Like we can change like little bits and pieces. It's like trying to, you know, do maintenance on a Ferrari with Honda engine parts. It's not going to be, you know, a good result. It might, the car may run, but not run effectively. So that's the option. That's the choice that we all have. You know, is to understand that if we do cultivate ourselves, or we do understand our true nature, and we make a commitment to this path, then that's all you can do to change the world. You know, it's like in the I Ching when Richard Wilhelm said that a lot of people criticize the sage for sitting up on the mountain and you know, disassociating himself from worldly problems and society in general, but that sage is, in doing so, he's creating values for the future that you don't even know. Like his effort to the path and the way that he lives, it's a reminder for everyone of what's true in life. You know, it's like, you know, India's a perfect example, right? You could walk any street. You could walk the street to Delhi or Calcutta or Mumbai or Chennai or anywhere, and there's always sadhus or yogis hanging around. And that's a reminder for the common folk that what's true and what's real, you know. So we need to take that to heart and know that our life is important to everything else. You know, it is important to everything else, and how you are oriented and how you conduct yourself is important to everything else. So if we are focused on this, then, you know, this is going to create incomparable, like amazing value in the future for humanity. You know, so this is why in Buddhism they talk about that there's an emphasis on Bodhichitta, and Bodhichitta is basically that extreme effort and focus we have on cultivation, on meditation. And you have to have Bodhichitta to be a Buddhist, right? You have to have Bodhichitta because you have to have that enthusiasm and effort towards meditation, towards individual development, of developing the mind and coming back into accord with your Buddha nature and an understanding of shunyata. So we can use that as a template for our own life. You don't have to believe in Buddhism, but we can use that as a template for our own life to everyone listening and you and I. So yeah, I think that's what's important, and I think that we basically covered everything, didn't we?
Yeah, I thought it might be a bit too vast subject, but I think we covered quite good.
Nature is a conversation, love. It just goes anywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that's what people like. You know, I think that's what you guys like. You know, people like, we like a good conversation. We all do. You know, there's an art of conversation that I think is not appreciated in the world, because usually conversations these days are opinionated and turn into debates and arguments, and it's very unique to have a conversation where two people can sit down and just talk about subjects and in a civil manner, you know.
It's it comes down to that mindfulness listening, and also speaking as well.
Exactly.
Which is again hard to do, not easy. Truly listening itself is, I think, it's not that easy as what people think. I don't think.
No.
Yeah.
Well, even listening, like in relation to yoga, I mean, is some sense an art of concentration.
Right.
And that's a difficult thing. You know, we always hear Thich Nhat Hanh and we hear these guys about, do you truly listen? You know, and we've all been guilty of it. We've been in conversation and our mind fades out, or we're thinking about what we want to say next. And, you know, this can end in a bad way. And it does cultivate bad habits in the way that we can communicate with each other. And what we need, especially not only now but forever, is we need to learn how to communicate better with each other so we can understand each other better. That's how the world's going to become harmonious, and we are going to move towards the ideal of world peace and so forth and so on. We often, especially on a political level, and when we talk about world leaders, they often lack communication skills and they speak at each other rather than listen to each other. And I mean, we see this in the YouTube comments, and we see this on social media. It's rife, where people speak at you as if they know you. And this is back in the day, if you went and spoke to a stranger like that on the street, you might get put up in the mental asylum. And that's what's basically happened on social media. People are speaking to each other, speaking to people that they don't know.
Yeah.
And so, if anything, as you know, that I'm trying to do on this channel is to create an intelligent discourse and dialogue with people about the deeper topics that are going to contribute to better individuals and a better, hopefully a better humanity. So
yeah, I hope this helps to everyone.
Yeah. So it was a good chat. Remember, you guys, check out my Patreon if you enjoy this, and let us know. Let Guy Young and I know what you think about this podcast format. It's something we've been mulling over for a long time, and I mean, we're very excited about it. So we're going to keep going anyway, regardless. But let us know. You know, constructive criticism and feedback is all good, and even the trolls. You know, I read those too, but I don't respond anyway. So, hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you guys in the next one.